Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why exercises such as the strict Pendley row, hip belt squat, and good mornings are so effective for hypertrophy. Now, obviously I chose exercises mainly for back and legs here today. This same concept can be applied to a lot of different movements, things that I like to use for, the upper body. But when we look at some of these exercises, they have something in common. Every one of them allow you to stimulate very, very large amounts of muscle growth while using a relatively light weight. And when I say that, I don't mean that, we're just doing a smaller exercise. It's not the point, because I've had people say, well, when we use that logic, shouldn't a chest fly build the chest better than a press? Because you're using a lighter weight. Well, no, because you're stimulating less muscles. Okay, it's not just about the weight involved. And here's exactly what I mean. A lot of people note my back development. I've done a lot of other heavy back work, but these days all I do, and again, I got a pretty big back, all I do is strict Pendley rows with the axle bar. That's my main lat and back exercise. Doesn't mean I don't do deadlifts and good mornings and stuff, but those things are not necessarily working the mid traps, the lats, all that stuff to the same degree. A lot of those are a little more rector based. But you take something like the Pendley row. It doesn't take a lot of weight, because if you're doing it very strict, I'm only doing 155 pounds there for sets of 15. Now, I've certainly done plenty of much, much heavier back movements than that, yet that seems to continue to cause my back to grow. And when you look at it, when you understand the fact that it's very easy to recover from because of the nature of the exercise, it becomes very, very obvious of why you can build so much back development off of it. Because again, you can do large numbers of sets. I do that 3 times a week. We're talking about 15 sets of those per week. When you look at the way that the lats are utilized in it correctly, if you do it correctly, the lats have to pop it out of the bottom. Now, a lot of times when people do cheat rows and stuff, they get less lat development. It's also harder to recover from. But there's very, very little axial loading when you use a fairly light weight on those. You have a lot of isometric strength through the posterior chain, like the erectors, glutes, hamstrings. They all get trained isometrically, but that's not hard to recover from. It actually works things like the rear delts and mid traps a lot better than something like pull-ups and chin-ups, even weighted pull-ups. But by comparison, are you going to be able to do 15 limit sets a week on weighted pull-ups and recover easily? I've done more sets than that. I've done up to 35 sets in a week before the rows. I just don't find that I need that many. It starts taking up way too much of my time. But the point is that you could do it if you had the work capacity. So what we start finding is that even though something like the pull-up might on a set per set basis give a little more lat development, it's not going to build the rear delts, the traps, the erectors, any of that as much even set per set, but just the lats, right? Just the lats. But you can do way more sets of that and recover because of the nature of them, particularly compared to cheat rows of any type, any sort of cheating row. And then by that same token, you're also removing the isometric strain from the low back when you start doing anything that's chest supported or anything else. So what you find is that an exercise like that, because it allows you to maximally stimulate the back with a much lighter weight, it tends to allow for much better overall development, mainly because you can do more total sets and recover. It's again, like I've heard Louis Simmons say, if I want to get someone stronger, I want to get them as strong as possible with the lightest weight possible. And that's where things like good mornings come in. Another perfect example. 135 pounds on a super strict good morning for sets of 10 to 15 reps is actually a lot. It's actually a lot. I think you guys would be surprised how many 450, 500 pound deadlifters can't do these strict controlled, and again, the way I'm doing them here, may not even be able to do correctly 15 reps of 135. Right? They might be turning them into a cheat movement, but you take the good morning and people say, well, couldn't the Romanian deadlift do the same thing? Well, the same muscles are worked. And I don't think the Romanian deadlift is a bad exercise. In fact, I think the Romanian deadlift is a good exercise for hypertrophy. But you look at a movement like this and you realize you can use about half the weight because of the moment arms involved, because of the stress, because the weight is moved much, much, much further up the back. We get more leverage lower down with a lighter weight, with half the weight really, as far as the rate of perceived exertion. Now, the downside, people say, well, but the Romanian deadlift is also giving some grip training. If you're relying on the Romanian deadlift as your grip training tool, you're not going to build a very strong grip. Okay? If that's what I relied on, I wouldn't be able to deadlift what I deadlift. Okay? If that was my grip training tool. It's not that phenomenal of a grip training tool. And if anything, people's grip becomes the limiting factor on an RDL, and they end up using straps anyways. Okay? So that excuse doesn't work. You already have to have a monstrous grip to really do a proper double overhand Romanian deadlift correctly without straps. Kind of a moot point. And you're still going to need other grip training. So you come over to something like this. We can work all the same muscles with the same amount of tension at the level of the muscle. All of the erectors, the glutes, the hamstrings, with about half the weight. Okay? What does that mean for recovery? It means we can probably do twice as many sets. You have to think in terms of stimulus to fatigue. And I'm not saying that people should do high reps just to have a lighter weight, because you're still extending the period of time out. You're still having recovery. In other words, doing 15 reps with a 15 rep max versus 5 reps with a 5 rep max, just because it's a lighter weight doesn't mean it's easier to recover from. It's going to be just as hard. Okay? Because you're still doing a limit set. But if we pick a variation, good morning versus an RDL, what happens? Well, we can do a lot more volume because we recover easier, because it's just less weight pushing down on the body. And when we're looking for hypertrophy movements, that is what we're looking at. I mean, your heavy strength work and max work should be heavy. But that's not our hypertrophy tools. Same thing, look at the hip belt squat here. I'm a mid 500 squatter. This destroys my quads. This little bitty lightweight for sets of 20 gives me a quad pump to where I can barely walk for the next 30 seconds to a minute after I step off there. Little bitty lightweight. Again, keeping in mind, you guys have seen me back squat 550, 552. I can box squat off of a deep box over 500 pounds. Yet that little simple exercise gives me an enormous amount of quad work. Very easy to recover from. You can do 3 to 5 sets of that in one workout, and yeah, your legs are going to be wobbly for 10-15 minutes. But once you recover, you're recovered. Now, are you going to do that with back squats? Are you going to do 5 high rep sets of back squats? No. In fact, I would say that we're not even going to get the same benefit from a hack squat machine. Why? Because they're still harder to recover from. There's all the axial loading component. And if we're already doing heavy squats and deadlifts, we don't need more axial loading. It puts the weight in traction. The weight is hung around the hips. The weight's hung around the hips. Yet, as far as the quads are concerned, your quads still feel like you're doing a squat. We're in a squat position, the same movement pattern. Now, granted, when you're on something like that, you've got to do a wider stance, but the wider stance squat works more muscle anyways, doesn't it? The research shows that it works just as much quad as a narrow stance with the same RPE, but we get other muscles involved, more hips, more glutes, things like that. Okay. The wider stance squat is technically superior for muscle activation. In that case, we're getting all the benefits of a wide stance squat for just the lower body, but we don't have anything pressing on the back. So people say, well, the leg press actually puts stress on the low back and takes a massive amount of time to load and unload your 1,500 pounds or 1,000 or whatever you're using. And if you're not using that much, you're probably pretty weak and you need to just do back squats. But a movement like that replicates the squat for the lower body, but you can do a lot more volume and recover from it because, again, we're not putting ourselves into an axial loading position. We're not pressing down on the spine. You can handle more sets of this per week and recover quicker. And if we can do more volume and more work and recover from it quicker, for the same amount of muscle stimulation, we're going to get more muscle growth. Okay? Now, these things don't matter for people who want minimalist programs and they want to get in and out of the gym as quickly as possible. That's different. These are not efficient. This is when we start talking about optimal training versus efficient training. Okay, it's efficient to just come in and do the biggest, hardest movements for a few sets, as much as you can recover from and get out. Okay, that's efficient. But efficient doesn't produce maximum growth. This is saying how much total work can I do per week and stimulate as much growth as possible and still recover from it when time constraints are not as big of an issue. It's again about being optimal versus being efficient. They're totally separate things. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.